Welcome to the Wander Mode podcast, where we celebrate the fearless spirit of women embracing life's wanderings. Where every story is a spark of inspiration and reminds us that sometimes the most beautiful moments happen when we simply embrace wherever the journey may lead. This episode is for you if you are anything like me when it comes to papers. Maybe you don't know where your important papers are. Maybe sometimes you keep important papers or things that you're trying not to lose track of in one drawer, but then one day you decide randomly you're going to attempt to organize that drawer, and then the papers get moved elsewhere, and then you're like, well, shoot, now I don't know where that paper went. Suzanna Kay and I have a very interesting conversation all about organization, and not just any kind of general organization like making sure that your underwear drawer is organized. We're talking specifically about paper organization. And one of the things that I actually really took away from this conversation was the fact that the biggest reason I need my important paperwork or items like passports organized is because in the case that I had to evacuate my house quickly, running around and opening several different drawers or a small safe or things of that nature aren't necessarily going to play to my advantage when I am in a panic and needing to make quick decisions. And as I think about what's been going on around the country, especially from a weather perspective, when I think about the hurricanes in Florida and the fires in LA and these poor families dealing with so much loss already, the idea of what happens prior to evacuation and trying to assess what it is that you need to carry with you is heart-wrenching. And definitely not another thing that people need added to their plates. And Suzanna has a pretty unique solution to making sure that your paperwork isn't one of those things that has to be on your mind when you need to be making quick choices. So I hope that no matter what, you walk away with at least thinking about the fact that you should probably compile all of your stuff somewhere. Maybe it's just a bin for right now, like mine. Take a listen. Let me know your thoughts. Be sure to share with a friend if you think a friend could benefit from hearing this episode. Suzanna, I am thrilled to chat about all things organization today because it is something that I care a lot about to keep my life intact and a lot less stressful. So I'm excited to jump into it, but I'm curious just how it is that you're coming into the podcast today as a mom, an entrepreneur. Where's your headspace at?
My headspace, I will be honest with you, my headspace is cluttered. Like my headspace is like Monica's closet on Friends, where you open the door and everything just falls out because there's just so much going on right now in my life and taking me away from my normal routines. And I've got a lot disrupting my space around me at the moment. So it also clutters my head even more.
As someone that does focus so much on decluttering and organization, just curious, like what systems you have in place for yourself on a day-to-day basis that keep you functional.
Thank goodness I am one for honesty because I have ADHD, which I did not find out until several years ago, much later in life. So routines have both been necessary and difficult for me. So my routines are kind of loose in that I don't force myself into them, but I do have some things that I just automatically do, thank goodness. One of the things I enjoy with being an online entrepreneur, though, is that every day can change. So if I need a change, I can always go with my energy. But I tend to wake up when I wake up because life has changed and it's a good hour of make some breakfast, feed the dogs, empty the dishwasher, like all the things. So the first hour, I'm using a lot of energy because my energy is higher. And then I sit for a bit. Sometimes I'll do computer work. Sometimes I will just watch a TV show. I give myself whatever my brain needs in order to be able to engage however it needs to the rest of the day. Like this morning, I actually sat down for a little bit, watched some TV because I knew that I was going to be on the podcast. So I was going to have to be able to form words correctly, which is hard enough without some adequate rest and recovery beforehand.
You needed to tune out and not be in your head so much.
Yes, or stuck in another project. My brain is still trying to solve another problem that I was just working on, or coming up with ideas about something else because I was just on a roll. That is not the right headspace to use my words in any reasonable form. I will stumble over them all the time.
Yeah. And curious, so it sounds like you would consider yourself more productive in the evenings compared to the mornings then? Like you need that slower start to get into your more productive time. Would that be accurate?
Nowadays, it is more accurate. I was actually diagnosed earlier this year with fibromyalgia, which just simply means, aside from chronic pain, which will change everything, but my mornings, I used to be such a morning person, and that used to be when I'd get everything done. I was the 6 a.m. person, and I'd have half my workday done before the family even got up. But once that came along, my body is just stiff and tired and sluggish in the morning. So part of my mental chaos and changes going on right now, honestly, is that shift from being a morning person to being somebody who is more of a night owl. And that's when my body has finally loosened up enough and I get some quiet time from the family. So now sometimes I'm working until 2 a.m. when I'm able to. And there's a lot of misconceptions out there, especially with business people, that productivity happens by waking up early and, getting the worm. But one of the things that I've talked about for years is how night owls can actually be even more productive than the early birds, because you have this unlimited time that you can work practically. You can work until the early birds get up and start emailing you. So making that shift myself has been a really interesting transition, taking my own advice and learning to turn that into productive time instead of downtime now, and starting to get a little bit more easy.
That's so interesting that you say that, because I was a teacher for 16 years and my days always started really early because I had to be at school by 7:30 to be there on time for the kids. And my husband is very much a night owl and very sluggish in the morning, takes a long time to kind of get himself going. And I had this perception for a long time of thinking that it was laziness. I mean, it's not kind. It was not a kind thought, but like just laziness. Like, how are you seriously not able to just get yourself up in the morning and just go and do this thing? And what's been fascinating is since I became a full-time entrepreneur a year ago and we're existing in one another's space more often, I've actually come to develop an appreciation for the fact that we do have our core time of productivity. Like he is super, super productive during the times that work for him. And I am super, super productive during the times that work for me, which happen to be in the morning. But now taking some time to observe him, it's given me more of an appreciation for like, wow, that really does happen at very different times for very different reasons for people. Yeah. I think it really is a misunderstood concept that it isn't actually laziness. It's just a difference in what it is that you are capable of during different times of day based on your REM sleep, your cycles, if you're going through menopause, if you've been diagnosed with something.
Everything can affect your energy levels. And I mean, back in the day, it probably seemed like night owls were lazy because the work days were 9 to 5, a lot of times earlier. And their energy did not kick in until 4. So they're the ones that would probably work late at the office, but the fact that they would arrive late and they would not really get going was probably where that observation came from. And the traditional productivity is all of these great billionaires and entrepreneurs, they wake up at 6 a.m. and jump in an ice bath, and then they do 2 hours of HIIT cardio. That sounds like I would not want to live. But as we've transitioned over to being able to work virtually more, we've really gotten to see that these different energy levels is kind of like a superpower when you're working at whatever your energy level is at the time. And they aren't necessarily even just morning bird and night owl. I heard somebody was calling it, I think, procrastination pigeon, where they're like, I'm not either. But sometimes it's in the afternoon. Men go through an entire productivity cycle in 24 hours. We go through a productivity cycle in 28 days, before and after menopause. And before menopause, you can kind of track it along with your cycle, and it's a lot easier to see okay, well, these are the times where I'm probably going to communicate better. These are the times when I'm going to need to kind of sit back and just reflect on what's happened. And if you can find that pattern for yourself, then there will just be some weeks or some days where you get like 2 weeks of work done in one day. And then there might be a week where you're just meh, but that meh is important. So sitting in the energy that you're in and adjusting as much as you can. It's been life-changing for myself and for a lot of my followers and my members in my membership. We do talk significantly about, well, what's our energy right now and nurture that, and how can we work with that to still get things done without denying whatever process it is that we need to be going through, whether it's reflecting or being active.
What have been some of the biggest results that you've seen, whether it's cycle tracking or even trying to really understand like a recent diagnosis like ADHD or fibromyalgia? What has been life-changing about recognizing, okay, these things are impacting me, and therefore these are the tweaks that I need to make? Do you have any kind of transformation stories?
They're so varied because we all have different reasons why we feel blocked or we're struggling. But some of my favorite that have been the most overall life-changing, even though I focus a lot on paper organizing, within my membership, we also do work side by side together. So when we bring our authentic selves, but then we also bear the things that we are hiding, that back room, that closet that you normally would never want somebody to see. And when you share that with a group that you feel safe with, and you see that you're not the only one, that somebody else has their entire craft room they can't walk in, or maybe their house is immaculate, but they spend so much energy keeping it that way and they're exhausted and miserable. When you hear stories that are like yours, I think that's the most important thing, which is why I try to share when my literal world around me looks like it collapsed. You know, we all have those times. And when you feel like it's not something to be ashamed of, then it makes it so much easier to take the steps that are needed without all the pressure. The weight that's lifted off of them, the hope, they are excited about each day, and they're taking steps forward. They're not in a rush to get there. So it's not an overnight transition. It didn't get messy overnight, but they are excited about each day. They're excited to take their steps. Other areas of their lives improve too. When we improve our surroundings, or even just the way that we think about our surroundings and our definition of ourselves based on what we think about our surroundings, then it changes relationships and jobs and happiness and just so many other things. And I think that's my favorite thing.
I love that you said that toxic spaces or spaces that aren't conducive to a more positive energy, that they also zap our energy. I think oftentimes people think like, oh, it's going to take so much work to get organized. It's going to take so much time to choose what to get rid of. It's going to take effort. And I don't really have that kind of effort, or I don't really have that kind of time. But to your point, it still takes your energy. I mean, you're either taking energy to improve it, or it's taking energy to continue to exist in the chaos. Either way, it's an energy expenditure.
Absolutely. I can tell when I start to procrastinate more in the mornings, or when I'm feeling sluggish for the whole day, multiple days in a row, then that's when I kind of really look around me and see, has my environment started to get stressful for me? And I don't even see it. We usually don't see our own spaces when we're existing in them. But most of the time, when I look around, I think, oh, I didn't really notice what's actually going on around me. And once I get things settled to my level of need for organization, everybody's got a different level. But once it's settled, I get my energy back. So you can use your energy organizing, or you can use your energy sitting on the couch watching Gilmore Girls eating Thin Mints, which I do not think is a bad thing, but it should be my choice.
I love Gilmore Girls. I always promote that in Thin Mints.
Absolutely. But either way, you're using your energy. It's just one way is going to make the rest of your day and your tomorrow better, and one is just going to make your waistline bigger and not make you feel good in the long run. So I'd rather choose my days.
Now, it's interesting because you said you haven't always been this way.
Oh, no.
Like you're very transparent about the fact that there was a time Hot Mess Express, right? So tell me about that time, and what was that pivotal moment for you of recognizing, ooh, this has got to give. I've got to pick something else.
Yeah, I was not born organized. Like I said, ADHD runs strong in me, but we did not know at the time. I was just the girl who was not focused and needed to try harder. But I was always a creative person, and I really attached to things a lot when I was young. I was the kid that would sleep with literally every toy that I owned in my bed because I did not want them to feel bad by not being chosen. Like including the Fisher-Price farmhouse and the record player. It was all in the bed. And I just lived in this little tornado path. And I was the tornado, my poor mom. But, when you're little, it doesn't really seem to affect you as much. But as I got older and once I got into college, and now it was just me being responsible for making sure that the dishes got cleaned and picking up stuff after myself, and especially papers, not losing that bill. Because back then there was no online bill pay. It was, you lose the bill, you can't pay it. That's when I started to really see the effect. And I still remember, I don't know all of the story around it, but I still remember it hit me how different my lifestyle and surroundings were than my friends when my best friend, who she'd joke but never judge, she came over and she, for some reason, wanted to use a cooking pot, but she could not get a bowl unstuck from my cooking pot because macaroni and cheese had congealed them together. And that was when I realized, okay, the stuff is a problem. And I also started to notice, okay, well, the papers are an extreme problem because I didn't know what to do with them. And back then, the only way to learn organizing techniques, if you weren't taught, was through magazines and books. And they all taught the same thing, which did not work for me. The alphabetical 200 file folders, and they all go in the file cabinet. And that does not work for my personality type. So in early college, it began the path of adapting and adjusting and trial and error until I found ways that I was ashamed to tell people about because they were so out of the box, but things that actually worked for me. So I would actually hide my paper systems from people because I was afraid it was not a file cabinet with 200 file folders. It was a box with all of my important papers on the bottom and a couple file folders on top with current stuff. But I could find whatever I needed, and that's what was working for me at the time. Thankfully, it's evolved a little bit more, but I learned not to be ashamed of it because it's actually a different personality type. So that's when I got into studying all the different personality types and what works for each type of personality. And eventually, when I was leaving a career in corporate and I was in finance, I wanted something as far away from finance as I could find. And on monster.com, when I was looking for jobs, there is an ad to get your home organized. And I'm like, people do that? So, because I'd gotten organized and I'd figured out my systems and I'd learned about the different personality types. And if I had had a shortcut, if there was somebody out there to say, hey, try this, it sounds weird, but try it, or you're this personality type, I know what works for you, that would have saved me a good 20 years. So I tried it out and it fit. It was just everything that I've ever worked in made sense. It all came together. It was so natural and easy for me to understand what personality type people were, what they were struggling with, how could I help them in a way that was never judgmental. And that was always moving them forward and making them feel better about themselves throughout the process rather than feeling bad for not being at the end point. And that was just so important to me because uplifting others and giving people that hope and uncovering things that are holding them back so they can do the things that they're meant to do and really shine. That's my purpose in this world. And it was awesome.
I definitely want to unpack a little bit about that process that you go through with people to help them discover what's right for them without the shame. But I have a question that I'm curious about. How would you describe your mom from an organization perspective? So many of my girlfriends that I talk to, there's this flip-flop generationally with personalities. Oftentimes you either become the exact copy of your parents or you become the exact opposite. And I'm curious about this because my mom has so much emotional attachment to stuff, keeps everything. And I therefore keep nothing.
Right.
And my daughter, who is 4 and she's young, so I don't want to put her in a box and think that she's going to be this exact way. But so far, she's a stuff person.
Yeah.
You go in and on her bed, it's all of the animals at one time, all of the little knickknacks, all of the things.
She's
I'm like,
me.
Yes, I'm like, girlfriend, you're gonna have nowhere to sleep. What?
Yep.
You're squeezing yourself into this one small
right
spot. And so far, I just chuckle because I think, oh my gosh, she's my mom in 4-year-old form. And I love my mom. We have a great relationship. So I'm just curious, for you generationally, were you the same or were you the opposite?
So that's a hard one actually to answer and not really one that I thought as in depth about. And I'm glad that you asked. So that is fascinating. When I was born, it was in the time where if women were going to the workplace, but not all of them. So I was lucky enough that my mom could stay home with us, myself and my sister, until we started school full time. And during those times, she seemed to have it pretty together. I mean, she was never perfect and everything neat and orderly, but everything functioned pretty well. But she was a very interactive mom. So we always had creative things to do, and she was playing with us. So stuff was not as much of a focus. But once she had to go back to work, or chose to, I don't know if she had to, then that's kind of when things fell apart more, because of course she's not there all the time, and she's got 2 tornadoes living in the house with her that take everything apart when she's gone, which was me and my sister. So during that time, it was definitely more messy, understandably, and never horrible, but it was where I would not want my friends to come over and see the counter because there was no counter. And then as we moved out, then she kind of was able to get things back together. So I think the problem's kids. The problem is kids.
Okay, well, it's been diagnosed.
There we go. But no, it's very much, she was always perfectly organized at work. At home, when she was tired from work and trying to pick up after everybody and manage everything, there's only so much willpower we have. So I think it was just one person can't do it all, and they need help. And thankfully, for myself and my husband, we have equalized the workload and expect some of she's a little T-Rex. She's not a tornado. She's like a T-Rex, so eats all the meat and all the food in the fridge. We've really created a new dynamic, because I did not want to feel like what it seemed my mom was feeling during those years. I did not want to feel too burnt out or overwhelmed or unsupported. I don't know if she felt that way. I felt bad for her in that way. So I wanted to create something different to model for our little T-Rex, not so little anymore T-Rex. And so far it was working good until she started high school, and my husband has to drive her to school. So the non-morning person has to get up, and now we're starting to adapt from that too. But whenever you have it all together, something changes and it falls apart and you find a new way.
There's nothing, I think, like kids that make you recognize some of those cycles or seasons in life, that what worked for you for one period of time definitely doesn't work for you at this point in time. And now it's a pivot again for everybody to maintain their sanity and have a functional family.
Right? It's tough when every time you've got it together, the kid starts a new level of independence or a new grade or whatever the new thing is, and you have to redo everything. But at the same time, I'm so thankful for it, because it's made me understand my energy levels and my needs and my husband's and what works best for us in various situations. So even though it's not easy to go through afterwards, I just feel so much more prepared in the world for whatever gets thrown at me, because I'm like, oh no, when puberty hit, that was the worst. This I can handle though. Like, it's not as bad as puberty. So it's been really helpful looking back, because I have more tools that I would not have had if it was not going through all the different stages and changes. And she's actually my stepdaughter, so we have her part-time, which makes it even more tumultuous as far as schedule and everything going on. And yeah, I'm just blessed, and she's amazing.
That's so cool. And all that life experience, to your point, then helps you work with your members. So walk me through a little bit of that process. When someone comes across your path, they get into your membership, or maybe they're choosing to go through one of your workshops or things like that. What do you help them address first before the actual systems part comes along?
2 things. I actually created the paper path system, which is a system for organizing all of the papers in your home and life, but a system where all of the parts flow together. So you don't have just a mail system and a file cabinet and all of these things that aren't connected. The first thing that I always set people up with, the action file. And the action file, it's not something that I sell. It's something that I just teach how you can put it together yourself with what you probably already have at home. But it's one place for all of the incoming paper, mail, to-do, active papers. It all sits in this, usually it's just a desktop, like a small desktop file holder. And it can live in there until it's done with whatever needs to be done. And then it flows either into the system or recycling or shred. But I always do that first, because if you have paper piles around, or if you've got an overflowing file cabinet, it's not going to help if you're focusing on a different part while the problem's still getting added to. So it's kind of like triage. First, you stop the bleeding. You create a safe space for everything that's important, that's active, that you're working on, and where new stuff can go. until you're ready to deal with it. Then you could start working on other areas because you aren't going to possibly lose a really important paper in there. You aren't going to be adding piles of mail to it. That's handled. So that's my first step. And then the second step is having the most essential medical information quick and easy to grab. So I have an emergency medical folder. And that's another thing I share for free. It's templates that are just worksheets. You fill in the blanks with you and your family's most important medical information and emergency information. So if something were to happen, you have this quick grab folder that you can take to the hospital. You could take it to doctor's appointments. So you have the information there. If the first responders come or the neighbor has to come and help, they've got the information they need. So that way you are protected health-wise for medical emergencies and those super quick evacuations or things like that, because that's usually our fear, right? Our papers would not stress us out so much if it weren't for the fact that we're afraid that we don't know what's in there, that we can't find what we need when we need it. And our family's health and safety is usually number one for us. So if we can at least get that medical information where, okay, I might not be able to find the insurance policy quickly, the car insurance, but I know that if we have to go to the hospital, I can take care of my family. I know what's going on and I can inform the doctors. And that just relieves so much pressure off of the rest of the project. And then we can take one bite at a time, small steps. It's called the path because it's tiny steps to build this project. So you don't need hours at a time. You could do it 15 minutes a day type of thing. As we go through, we deal with those scary parts that are worrying us about what's in the papers first. And then we can get everything else settled because we know we can handle whatever life throws at us. And that's just where the relief comes in. That's where I start to see the weight lifted off.
That makes so much sense. And I wouldn't have even really thought to think of it that way, but you're right. Like the number one panic about getting rid of papers is that somehow I'm going to misplace, lose, accidentally ruin, accidentally get rid of something that I shouldn't have. And then when I need it, it's like, well, shoot.
Yeah, I don't have it, or where is it, right?
Right. Like I shouldn't have organized then. I should have just left it where it was because then it still would have been here somewhere. So but I like the idea of starting with those critical pieces where it's like, this is our absolute bare minimum information that we need access to, something that's important. And then you're tackling everything outside of that because odds are once you get to that point anyways, I would guess that most of the papers or information that you're dealing with after you go through those first steps, probably not super crucial stuff.
Yeah, we go through it kind of by layers of that top layer or that layer in the kitchen that recently came in. That's going to be the next part that you look through. And if it's important, put it in the action file. If it's not, you can put it in your to sort later. But after you get through that top layer of paper, then pretty much the stuff underneath is not catching fire. It would have caught fire already and you already dealt with it somehow. The stuff underneath, when you get to it, it's usually going to be okay. And really, if it had come up without you starting organizing, then you still would have had to search through that pile. So it's not going to affect anything. And for the second step of the whole paper path system, that's when I introduced the idea of a Spark Lifebinder, which you can either build your own or I sell the Spark Lifebinder if you want to have it mostly done for you.
Save yourself some time.
It saves a lot of time, but it's basically one place where as you come across important information about your life, when you're creating your file system or purging files or going through and sorting papers. Whenever this information comes to you, you've got a place to record that information. And the goal of the Spark Lifebinder is to have one place where you have all of the important paper for your entire life, not just the medical. You have your homeowner's insurance policy and basic information and the contact information. You know who the plumber is. You have an inventory of your home in case of loss. You have your kids' information, what their schools are. You have everything, pets, passwords, finances. It's all the important information is in one place. So no matter what the papers look like, you have the information that is on the papers. So you can take your time with those as well, because that Spark Lifebinder, not only do you have access to it all the time, but your family does too. They don't have to figure out your file system. You don't have to tell your husband 20 times where to find something. You can trust that it's like, there's just one place. Just remember one thing. That's all you need. And then their papers aren't scary anymore because they have the information.
And then it sounds like you really truly can just take it one section at a time.
Yeah. A lot of times what I say is whenever you're working with your papers or if the mail comes in, you get the new insurance policy paper, the statement of coverage. Great. tuck it into the Spark Lifebinder, or quickly write it into that section of the Spark Lifebinder. And if you're doing that, even if it's out of order, you're filling in all of these essential pieces of information as they come to you anyways. Even if you never started as a project, it's getting filled out without any effort, because the papers come to you, you just quickly enter it in, you can handwrite it, and then later on go back and type it nicely if you wanted to. But it makes it so much easier than feeling like you have to even do an entire section at a time. You don't. You can challenge yourself to do a page in one day, or do just what you know off the top of your head. You can let things come to you. Every piece of information that you enter, even if it's not completely filled out, still makes it more and more useful. And a lot of times I tell people to jump around. If the end of life section is stressful for you to think about, don't do it all at once. Do a couple of other sections first. Again, working with your energy levels and making things brainless, make the decisions come to you. It's so much easier than trying to force a big project into our daily lives when we just don't have the time.
So out of curiosity, how do you handle the security of that information? Does that ever come up as a question? Because when I think about all of our papers at home right now, it's like, it's such a disaster that really for anybody to land on all of our information at once would be, it's just not even possible, right? Like they might find the passports, but they're not going to find all this information because that's spread across 15 boxes.
I can't even find it. How can they?
Right? Exactly. So it's so beautiful to be like completely organized, but then I'm also thinking in my head, like everything about my life is in one binder. Yes. So how do you address that?
When you get the Spark Life Binder, whether you get a digital or the actual physical binder that's already put together, you also get a whole area online with videos and trainings and explanations and question and answers. One whole section is about security, because it's true. That would be a thief's dream to have a Spark Life Binder. And they're like, oh, wow, they packaged it up for me. Will you put the TV in my car too, please? Yeah, we don't want that. So we talk about the fact that your emergency medical folder, that's your quick grab and run out the door, because that's just your medical information that other people need to be able to find easily. Your Spark Life Binder, there are a number of ways that you can keep it accessible to you and your family while keeping it safe from the eyes and the knowledge of anybody that should not see it. There are a couple of different options. There's a hiding it in plain sight, which I talk about how to hide it in plain sight so nobody would even realize what it was, all the way through to a home safe. If you wanted to keep it in the safe, you can absolutely do that. It's all up to your comfort level. Some people prefer to just keep it digitally, and you can through external hard drives or something like LastPass, password management, places like that. So we talk about, okay, well, what's your comfort level? And these are the solutions for you. So that way you always feel like it is protected, because it needs to be protected for sure. Otherwise we can't trust it. And once that's protected, then you do feel like, okay, well, this is better than the pile. But until then you're like, well, at least it's hidden from everybody.
Right. That makes so much sense. And I like the idea of starting with the question of what is your comfort level first. I have friends even that they're kind of just like, I'm an open book, like whatever people need to find, they need to find. To some level anymore, a lot of our information can be found relatively easily.
Yeah. Cutting your name and address off of the envelopes, generally not that helpful anymore, because that's so easy to find. There is that level of Google and Facebook already know everything about us, or whatever, that digital world. It's very easy to find a lot of the things. A lot of times I find that people default to not worrying about it simply because they don't know an easy way to stay protected with that stuff. So having a system like the Spark Life Binder and the hiding it in plain sight type of solution still makes it accessible for them, but it gives them a much higher level of security than they're currently doing. I used to always say back in the day, I'm like, they could steal my identity. Maybe they'll feel bad for me and they'll bring me money. But it is really difficult if somebody steals your identity to go through and get that all cleared up. So we don't really want that for anybody. But we also don't want people to panic either. We don't want you to feel like you have to make your house and information into Fort Knox and make existing miserable. A lot of times education, well, this is how stuff can be used against you. So these are the things that are important to protect. These things maybe, you could loosen up on if you choose to. These are some processes. Once you know more, then it also makes you feel a lot more comfortable, because you have the education to know that it's not everything that has to be super protected and you don't even know why. You know, okay, I've got this covered. These are the things. This is how I can do it and be super protected. And then they can sleep at night.
Well, and in some ways too, if you think about it from the other side, is that the more that you grasp where all of your information is located, the easier then you can take the steps to protect it.
Yes.
Versus, well, it is everywhere and I am protecting these things really well by having this in a lockbox. But oh my gosh, like there's 5 things over here now that I didn't even think about that should be protected. And
Absolutely. Then you know what to pay attention to, what you need to spend more energy on. You don't have to worry about going in and out of the file cabinet as much. So that can be more protected. You can have a locking file cabinet that you put further away from where it'd be convenient for everyday access, which makes it harder for somebody to find and break into. And it makes it easier in an emergency. You know what to grab and go if you had to evacuate really quickly, because you can't take the file cabinet. It's too heavy. So, this is where I grab and go if I have to, which is also another layer of protecting your stuff.
Right. I mean, that brought to mind the hurricanes in Florida and watching some of the videos of people trying to scour their homes and pull stuff out and get stuff into cars and taking things with them. You're absolutely right. Even just in the case of an emergency, it removes that from having to be a consideration. You can put your energy elsewhere.
Yeah. I live in Orlando, so hurricanes, that's a way of life. Thankfully, I'm inland enough that I don't have to worry as much, but floods, trees falling on the house, a fire from a downed power line, those things could happen. So having the system where I know that the information is protected, not only from the wrong people, but also from fire and water for the things that are really important. That allows me to be a lot calmer if I have to evacuate, because if I have time, then I can also grab those parts of my file system. If I don't, I can just grab the 2 parts that are the essential and all the living things in the home. And it just gives a whole lot more peace knowing that as we drive away from the house, we've got the things that we absolutely need. We don't want to lose anything else, but we would survive and it would not be as hard as it could be, which I've helped people when I used to do one-on-one. I've helped people after fires and floods and hurricanes, and the loss is hard enough, but when you lose things that then make it so much harder, especially if somebody loses a spouse and they don't know where the information is because the spouse was the one that took care of it. It's just so much more devastating to go through that process and have to deal with the what ifs and the unknowns and the loss of the papers and information that would make it easier to recover.
It keeps you in the grief longer because you're stuck in having to figure everything out versus just, oh, okay, I already know this. Check, check, check. We're moving on.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, I'll be sure to put in the show note links, the downloads and stuff that you have available to you. But it sounds like there's different formats in which people can work with you either through the membership or through an online course or things like that. You want to, maybe this will be a good spot to end, but you want to just talk through a little bit about what's right for certain types of people and why it is that someone would choose to come into a membership versus just a one-time course or something like that.
Absolutely. And that's exactly the reason why I offer the different options, because different personality types and different lifestyles need to consume information differently. So if you're a caregiver and your time is very limited, or if you work full time and you've got kids and the tornadoes are running the house, you might not be a good fit for the membership, because the membership, one of the benefits of the membership is that we work side by side with each other several times a week. You don't have to attend those, but that is one of the primary benefits, is having that time on your calendar, that commitment to show up and actually get some productive work done. So the DIY products, like the Paper Path course. The course walks you through everything that we talked about today. Everything from action file, emergency medical folder, Spark Lifebinder, setting up the file systems, protecting the important papers, the whole flow and systems for your papers. And it takes it step by step, and it's at your own pace. So if you're limited on time, or you're just not a get together with people person, if you are somebody who can hold yourself accountable well to what you decide to do, then Paper Path course is perfect for you. And you probably don't need the membership. I also have webinars for those people who aren't sure yet, or they're not ready yet. They don't really want to take on doing the full paper system because it can feel overwhelming. So I've got a number of different webinars that I also offer for just specific things, like getting started with photo organizing or managing your notes, lists, and ideas. So those are a dip your toe in. And those are great if you're just getting to know me and you've already got your action file and your emergency medical folder set up and you're wondering what more is out there. Then dip your toe in with a webinar. You can see my style and learn a bunch of really good stuff.
Oh, I just love all the options. And you are a wealth of knowledge. And I appreciate your authenticity with all of this too. And thank you so much for the conversation today.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. This has been so much fun. I love talking organizing and I love your podcast. So I'm thrilled to be here. Thanks.
Thanks for wandering with me today. If you were inspired by this episode and think it would ignite a spark in a friend, don't hesitate to share. And if you're craving more from the Wander Mode community, hop on over to Instagram at WanderModeCo. Meet you in the next episode, and until then, wander on.